First of all, I look hell Asian today, but it's okay. We're gonna roll with it. Well, welcome back, guys. It has been a week. I think it's been a week because we've been good and we've been growing and we've been grooving with the waves. If you are new here, my name is Stacey Danielle. I am the creator of the She Blooms channel. I am also an owner of She Blooms LLC, and we are just doing amazing work in the community, which has just been such a blessing to be able to just give back. So, if you guys didn't know, I have worked in the mental health and social services industry for the last 6 years, as a case manager, as a counselor, as an advocate, working with people with various traumas, right? Like I worked in a parenting and pregnant teen shelter. I've worked in domestic abuse shelters. I've done community case management, working with homeless population, helping them get into supportive housing. So obviously my passion, my ministry that God has blessed my hands to do well is to help people. And obviously through working through those industries, like I saw a deficit in terms of need. So really the purpose behind She Blooms was to ensure that everyone had an equal opportunity to get the resources that they needed, more specifically for me. So when I was going through my separation at the time, I wasn't able to qualify for a lot of the services that I needed because they were going based off of my husband's income. So despite whether I had an income or not, they were going based off of his income. And so it kind of like forced me to have to leave an effort to get the services that I need, such as like hiring an attorney, whatever the case might be. So there was a huge process behind that. And I just feel like even with people who had a limited income, right? There was such a small threshold that allowed them to be approved, because I remember I was even working part-time still at the hospital when I did leave, and I wasn't qualified for services because I made too much money. So it really is about the accessibility, ensuring that everyone has the right to safe housing, everyone has the right to being in safe environments, and everyone has a right to getting the services that they need, right? Like I think a lot of the shelters are really good in terms of providing safety, but what does it look like moving into the next level? Like how do we cultivate healing so they aren't ending up back in that situation? Like how do we actually have practical tools to work on ourselves, work on our self-esteem, work on building up our character, work on the things that are the underlying issues of the reasons why we're continuously being in these traumatic situations, toxic relationships. So my heart behind that is that one, God told me that I needed to do all of these services for free, so I was obedient to that. But I think it's also important that there's no barriers. It really boils down to the heart behind it is to eliminate all barriers so people can get the supportive services that they need. And so obviously my books and other things will be for sale, but in terms of just like these workshops that I crafted myself from a trauma-informed lens, from a counseling lens, these are really good courses that I've crafted. Like these are all free to the community. Obviously I'm starting one of the workshops today, and then I'm going to be taking into the community. So I'm already going to be teaching at a few different shelters that are in this area. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see that grow. But aside from that, I just wanted to come on here because it just like was in my spirit, right? The idea of just your words, right? And how that plays an impact on you, on how you show up, how, whatever the case might be, right? And so I was just thinking in terms of, I was having this conversation with one of my friends, and I asked them just about my character personally, right? Like, do you see this in me? And so I know this person's not going to lie to me. And so that's the reason why I went to them, because I'm very direct. Like, I'm actually quiet. Like, am very introverted, but I'm actually really direct. And I think it intimidates a lot of people here, specifically in Minnesota, because they never expect it. But, anyways, that's beside the point. So I'm very direct. I'm just cutthroat, straight to the point, like, let's get moving, like, we have work to do. And so I asked them, because I'm like, okay, well, they're not going to lie to me. So as I asked them, like, hey, like, do you see this in me? And they're like, no, why are you asking? I was like, well, it was just something that I heard. Right? So take that. There was something that I heard, and then they were like, well, blah, 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 whatever the case might be. I'm not going to put the whole conversation out there, but it really made me think, right? Because, like, not only this, but when I was writing the other day of how not only our words, right, and the things that we say about ourselves shift our beliefs, but also what other people say. And so as I've just been dealing, consistently over the last several weeks about the things that people are saying about me, I really had to, like, test myself, right? Like, I'm really big on growth, right? Like I've said it before, it's one of my top values. Like, I value growth to an extreme, right? Like, I am not one of those mothers who thinks I know it all. Like, that is just not my personality. Like, and I remember asking my kids one time, I was like, what do you see me do most? And the reason why I asked them that question is because I wanted to see if the life that I said I was living is a reflection to them, right? Because they're around me the most. Like, I spend, like, if my kids aren't with their dad, like, they're with me. Like, I spend my time with my children, especially in this season where, like, home has just been more important to me. Than anything else. And so I asked them, like, what do you see me doing the most? And, like, here I was going to say that they were going to say, like, oh, I'm on my phone, because sometimes, like, I am, like, looking up words, looking in the Strong's Concordance, like, reading my Bible app, scrolling, whatever the case might be. And they were, like, worshiping. And I thought that was so powerful because, one, I didn't expect it, and it's nice that they're able to witness it in me. But anyway, so as I was going through this process of, like, well, what's true? Like, I'm hearing these things. Like, obviously, I want to humble my heart, right? Because to have a humble heart means that it's open for change, right? Like, it's open for growth. It's open for cultivation and edification to actually be pure. And so I'm like, well, what is true? And so this morning when I was talking to God about it, he was just like, the problem is that you're consistently taking the projections of others and applying it to yourself. And I was just like, well, what do you mean? He was like, what do your kids say? Like, and so I thought about it, right? Because obviously I have these conversations often with my kids, like, or my kids will randomly be like, oh, you're just the best mom ever. Or I think one time my son was like, you want to know why I respect you so much? He was like, because you're always willing to give to the poor, and you're always talking about God. Like, you always find jobs where you can talk about God. And so because I was battling with this, like, internal dialogue, right? Like, God allowed me to shift my perspective a little bit around, like, what are you listening to, and, like, what are you holding on to? And I think it's very important, especially, when people have suffered from trauma and abuse, and so many people have been speaking things over you. You have to come back to the truth. And the truth is only found in the Word of God, right? Like, I've really been practicing this idea of readiness, right? Like, preparedness, more specifically in, like, my secret place with God. Like, how do I challenge my not ready? Because there are so many times where I'm like, hey, I'm not ready. And then God has to sit there and do, like, a little, like, powwow, go team little thing with me about, like, actually you are ready. Like, and so he will actually send me through a series of, like, did I give you that, right? Like, in terms of, like, fear, like, no, you didn't give me the spirit of fear. You gave me a power, love, and a sound mind. Okay, so what do you do when your mind is being attacked? Well, I take every thought into captivity and test it against the knowledge of God. Like, again, right, we are practicing, like we are edifying, we're literally taking the word and applying it to our life because we know that the enemy is out to kill, steal, and destroy, right? We know that he is going to come in different ways and different people in order to attack our minds, to make us believe something that is not true, right? We have to be cautious of not only hearing what others are saying, but now we're also applying it to ourselves, right? We're also taking what they're saying and making that our belief. We're making that our Bible, like our word, knowing when the word of God says to take every thought into captivity, knowing that there is a real enemy, right? Like the devil he wants you to feel defeated. He wants you to feel wounded. He wants you to get fatigue, right? Because when you're feeling all of these things, then you give up, you surrender, you stop going, you stop moving forward. Like, just because you're facing like a hiccup in a road or someone saying something to you about you, that doesn't mean you stop everything. No, you press forward to the prize in which God has set out for you. Like that is our ministry. That is our mission, that we don't stop. Like people are going to persecute you. People are going to say whatever they want. People are going to throw their stones at you. And how do you have the endurance to continue when all of these things are happening? Like one of the good things that like I actually, last year I really struggled, but like I'm actually really glad that it did happen. So like obviously as I'm going through a stripping process, I was alone last year. Like I was alone. I didn't have friends to talk to. Like I didn't have anyone. Like it was literally me and God. And not that I idolize relationships in any certain way, but I think there was an intentionality that God needed to understand that he is my only source. So when I'm feeling those moments of feeling attacked, like when I'm feeling wounded, when everybody is turning their backs on me, when I'm being persecuted, who do I run to? Like who is only my true and consistent source in my life that I know is not going to change on me, who I know is going to. And it was hard, like it was difficult, like being in a season where I felt so isolated, where I felt abandoned, where I felt alone, where I felt like the same people that I had like consistently been there for weren't always reflecting that back to me. And God had to, one, humble my heart, but he also had to shift my perspective. At the end of the day, right? Like I think we live in such an individualistic culture. And I don't know if this is going to make sense, but we live in a very individualistic culture, right? Where it's very me focused and me driven and what can I do? And da 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 da. And they didn't do this to me and they did that for me. And it's at the end of the day, what if God is actually using you? Like, what if everything that he is asking you to do, everything that he's telling you to do is an effort, so then that way you can be the light in that person's life. So that way you can demonstrate what love looks like, what selflessness looks like, what sacrifice looks like. And so this morning, last night actually, when I was like talking to God, he was like, I just want to let you know how selfless you are. And like I sat there crying because there are so many times people will call me selfish, and I know that's not my heart, and I know that's not my spirit, and that's something that I constantly have to take to God. And he's like, just because people project not being able to show up for you doesn't necessarily mean that they don't see that in you. And I think we get so focused on people not showing up the same way that we do, that we neglect what God is doing in that person's life through you. And so not only do we have to test the words that we're speaking over ourselves because it's other people, but we need to also be very cautious about what the world is saying, right? Because the world is very much me, you didn't do this, da 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 da, blah, blah, blah. You aren't that. But it's like, no, like God created us intentionally with a purpose, for a purpose, to be his hands and feet. And that doesn't always look pretty. It doesn't always look like the prettiest thing and the most admirable thing when you're in the room, literally on your hands and feet, scrubbing your enemy's foot. Like that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good, but can we live a sacrificial life? Like, can we continue to come outside and step outside of ourselves to be the hands and feet of Jesus and not complain and not allow the rocks of people telling you what you are to all of a sudden get us off of our mantle. Like, the only true and solid assurance that we have is knowing that God's truth about us is more valid than anything we would ever hear. So, as you are going about the rest of your week, be very, very intentional about what you're taking in, and let what doesn't reflect your character, what doesn't reflect God's character, set it down. Set it down, because it doesn't make any sense for you to continue to harp and dwell on these things, because the insecurity roots that people are trying to plant inside of you is actually what they're feeling inside of themselves. I pray this did something for you today.